Good morning, everyone. It's 9:02. Apologies for the 2-minute late start. Welcome to the April 26, 2022 Board of Police Commissioners meeting. We acknowledge that we are on traditional lands of Treaty 4 territory, a treaty signed with 35 First Nations across southern Saskatchewan and parts of Alberta and Manitoba, and the original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. The City of Regina owes its strength and vibrancy to these lands and the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory, as well as settlers from around the world who continue to be welcomed here and call Regina home. Some members of the board may be attending the meeting today through video conferencing. I'll remind those members to ensure your video camera and microphone are off. If you wish to speak, use the raised hand function to be placed in the speaking queue. And when speaking, please activate both your microphone and your camera. Can I have a motion to approve the public agenda? Thank you, Commissioner Yee. I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none. Can I next have a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of March 29th, 2022? Thank you, Commissioner Duncan. Any errors or omissions? I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Carried. Our first report up is PO 22-13, the 2021 District Year-End Reports. Chief, could I ask that you please introduce this report?
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mayor Masters, and morning members of the board. So the first report is our district year-end reports. We do this on an annual basis to the board. We bring forward reports from the 3 districts within the Regina Police Service. We have a north, a central, and a south district that we operate under. And really, this is an opportunity for us to give you a better and deeper understanding of, first of all, the geography of the district. So how is the city split up from our policing perspective? Within the districts, there are different zones, and so we'll be able to talk about that. We'll also give you in these reports some crime comparisons. So how does it compare year over year from district to district, within the zones, within the district, and then, of course, comparison with the districts itself. What proportion of crime happens in different regions of the city. And so we're going to give you these reports. As you probably note behind us today, we've got a lot of members from the Regina Police Service here because there's a lot of work that goes to putting these reports together. A lot of information in these reports. The 3 presenters that are going to present, they're not going to read the reports for you verbatim, but they're going to give you a highlight of what they are. So the way it's going to work, we've got Sergeant Ian Barr sitting up here. He is going to be starting off presenting the North District report. When he is done, we'll have another person come forward, present the South District, and then the Central. So if you have any specific questions for the North District, we'll keep Ian up here to answer those questions. But if there's some general questions, I'm sure the group of us at the front will be able to ask. But we've also got experts here from our school resource area, our PAC team, community engagement, a variety of different areas. So depending on where the questions are aimed, we've got experts in the room that hopefully will be able to answer them. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Sergeant Ian Barr, and Ian is going to walk us through the first report of the 3, which is the North District Year-End Report for 2021. Ian?
Good morning, Mayor Masters, members of the board. As Chief Bray said, I'll be presenting the North District Report on behalf of Inspector Sean Fenwick. The North District of the Regina Police Service consists of the area primarily north of the CP Main Railway tracks, roughly at Saskatchewan Drive, with the exception of the North Central area, which obviously falls in the Central District. This area in the north is further broken up into 3 patrol zones for the purposes of our police service, being Northwest, Northeast, and the West Zone. Administratively, the North District at the Regina Police Service includes North District Patrol shifts, which is our emergency response, traffic, CTSS, and the Crime Stoppers Community Coordination Program Officer. So in regards to the statistics, property crime for the Regina Police Service accounted for 29.9% of our total crime stats in the entire city. That's a 1.5% increase from 2020. So breaking that 30% down into the property crime stats for the North District, the Northwest, which is their largest geographical area, accounted for about 46% of our property crime occurrences in the North District. Northeast was 35%, and the West was 19%. In 2021, the property crime violations in the North District were up about 7% from the 2020 numbers, but down about 30% compared to 2019. Moving on to crimes against the person, they accounted for approximately 27.5% of the crime in the entire city of Regina. And out of that 27.5%, in the North District, our Northwest, again, being the greatest population and the greatest geographical area, accounted for 48%. Northeast was 34%, and the West was 18%. These numbers are rounded just in case anybody's doing the math. They don't add up to exactly 100%. The numbers are about on par with the pre-pandemic levels and very similar to 2020 for crimes against the person. Moving on to the traffic enforcement, which would be our traffic safety unit, and the CTSS, or Combined Traffic Services Unit. In regards to tickets, summary offense tickets, the RPS in total issued about 34,522 tickets. Those out of those 35,000, the ones issued by police officers was about 15,700. And breaking those down, traffic issued about 12,000 of the 34,000, which is an increase of about 15.8% as compared to 2020. And traffic and CTSS participated in a number of impaired driving enforcement projects, intersection safety projects, and these are projects that are funded by the Automated Speed Enforcement Program. 2021 was the 6th year of the Automated Speed Enforcement Program for the City of Regina. As you probably know, there are 3 cameras that are moved to various locations in the city. 2 of those are allocated to school zones, and 1 is allocated to high-speed corridor, Ring Road. A number of tickets issued by the Automated Speed Enforcement Program in 2021 was 18,809, which is down about 34% from 2020. The decrease was primarily in school zones, and that's very likely due to the fact that the school zone speed limit was lowered to 30 kilometers per hour, and there was some media attention paid to that. The red light camera program was updated in 2019 and continues to operate at 3 locations in Regina. Impaired driving continues to be a focus of our enforcement. Some stats on that: we received over 1,000 calls of reporting impaired drivers, and of those 1,000 calls, 374 drivers were apprehended and charged with impaired driving related offenses. Also of note, the traffic safety unit fully surveyed and measured 154% more collision scenes in 2021 and did 189% more full collision reconstructions in 2021 than in 2020. These are quite time-consuming investigations, and that's likely related to an increase in the vehicle traffic on our streets and roads after the pandemic in 2020, the traffic restrictions. In regards to the CTSS unit, that unit ran 2 members short for 11 of the 12 months in 2021, with some members on long-term leave. Despite that, the unit slightly increased their statistics when compared to being fully staffed in 2020, also very likely pandemic related. CTSS unit issued 18,999 pieces of paper in 2021, which included roughly a 50-50 split, with those statistics being issued within the city limits of City of Regina and outside on the highways around Regina. That 19,000 number includes tickets, warnings, and vehicle defect notices. So it's an aggregate number. The calls for service attended by the CTSS unit was reduced when compared to 2020. Very likely, again, also pandemic related. During 2020, the unit's mandate shifted a little bit more to help out the front line, being that there was less vehicle traffic on the roads in early 2020. Also, CTSS unit worked with communities in southern Saskatchewan in line with their mandate to do some joint projects with the RCMP. Most of these were community events where impaired driving was typically a problem, beer gardens, rodeos, that kinds of thing, and a very successful partnership there. Many hours spent in 2021 also for the traffic safety unit and the CTSS unit, as they were the primary point of contact for many protests, doing enforcement and surveillance for those, for the health orders enforcement. Switching over to the Crime Stoppers program, some very good work done there. They received 890 tips, cleared 108 cases, and had 52 arrests. The cleared cases and arrests are both the highest statistics for that program since 2014. And they're also responsible for just over $173,000 in property being recovered. And that concludes my summary of the North District year-end report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Barr. Members of the commission have questions. Councillor Barshiani.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the work and the information. In regards to the red light camera, it says the red light camera is operating at 3 intersections, which you've indicated, with 4 cameras. So do we have an extra camera, or how does that work? So we've got 3 intersections with 3 cameras, and we've got 1 extra camera, or how?
Yes.
Can you just elaborate?
Yeah, at one location, the cameras are fixed and stationary. So in one location, 2 directions are monitored. So
Okay.
3 locations, but 4 cameras.
Okay, okay. So through the chair, could that 4th camera be moved to another location instead of using it?
I mean, anything's
directions?
possible with the infrastructure, but these systems are most definitely stationary, not easily moved, and very expensive to relocate with the design that has to be put in, like the poles and the concrete chipping up and being
Okay.
poured and that kind of thing.
Sure. The one on the ring road, through the chair, the camera on the ring road, you've indicated that there's that one's movable, right?
Well, are you discussing the automated speed enforcement?
Yes.
Yes, the infrastructure is there in several locations, and the camera is removed from the cabinet and then moved to various locations.
Okay. And through the chair, how many locations do we have?
I'd be going by memory. There's about 6, I believe.
Okay. And is that directed through SGI, through the chair, of how many spots we can have, or how does that coordinate?
The infrastructure was put in place and designed based on speed studies that were done prior to the program being implemented. And there's one location south of Wascana Parkway where the cabinet was mounted in such a way that the camera can be faced out the front or the back to get in 2 different directions in one location.
Okay. And the locations are chosen, is it chosen by the city and then, and police together, or how does that work, do you know?
The locations were chosen a number of years ago, and I don't recall
Okay.
how that was exactly done. I know there was speed studies done, and the cameras are spaced out so that they can have the most effect at deterring the offensive speeding throughout the entire ring road.
I can add a little bit of context to that, Councillor. I was in the North District as the inspector when some of those early decisions were made around automated speed enforcement. It really was a collaborative effort between the City of Regina and SGI. Our police service has a position on that traffic safety committee, but it was really about the city identifying high traffic areas and then using SGI data to, basically reinforce the high traffic volume along with accident history, collision history, which quite often corresponds with the speed at which people are going to be traveling. And so that's how a lot of those locations were picked for the automated speed enforcement. With the red light camera program, that program survived or lived years ago, kind of died for a while because technology had changed. There was at one time the camera had to be linked to an actual sensor that ran under the roadway, which you can imagine in Regina with shifting geography, it caused lots of problems from an IT perspective. So when the technology changed and they decided to breathe new life into it, they initiated it basically back at 3 intersections that they determined to be the highest risk. And I think there is always an opportunity for the City of Regina, in collaboration with that traffic safety committee to reevaluate if there's other intersections that should be added. And it doesn't necessarily mean you take a camera away from one. They can add more to it if they want. There is, our police service doesn't have anything to do with the procurement of the devices. All we do is kind of the back-end administrative side of it. So once the tickets are identified, we have people that authorize them and do the administrative side of it, but most of it is done through the City of Regina in collaboration with SGI.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I got one of those tickets. Just in regards to alcohol tickets, but what about cannabis? How is that? Have we had any, how do we collect that data for cannabis? And I know that's kind of new, but I think I did read something where police, of course, are pulling people over. How is that?
That would be lumped in with the impaired driving statistics. We do have several devices. It's called a Sotoxa, which is a roadside screening device for the presence of cannabis. It uses a oral fluid swab, and those are sent out with the members daily. So we always have the capability of investigating an impaired driving offense that may be due to cannabis. But those offenses are all charged under the same section in the criminal code. There's a charge for alcohol-related offenses. There's a charge for alcohol and drug in combination, which is often the case. And then there's a section of the criminal code that just has a impaired driving by drug. And those are all lumped into those 374 impaired drivers.
Okay. And
But
so
I think, can we say, Ian, safely, that the number of occurrences where someone is charged with impaired driving strictly by drug is actually quite low?
Yes.
Most times it's either alcohol or a combination of both.
Okay.
And I think, and I'm asking the expert, Ian is one of our foremost traffic experts in the service, but I think part of it too is impaired by alcohol, if alcohol is present, is much quicker, easier to prove, and has been tried and tested in court. And so quite often that's the route we go.
Yeah,
correct?
exactly. Well said. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. Last question. So in the north, is there anything that, or any kind of red flags that that RPS is concerned about in this report?
Not that I would be able to speak to. I mean,
Anything that surprised, I guess, in this
no,
data?
the statistics are pretty normal, and you can see the pandemic related effect in some of the things bouncing back and some other things being reduced. But there was nothing shocking insofar as the crime stats for the north.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Councillor Brashani. Seeing no other questions, I do have a few, and I'm super happy you're one of the foremost experts on traffic right now. You had said in terms of impaired driving, there were over 1,000 calls coming into the system, and that 374 drivers were charged, is that correct?
Yes.
But you didn't tell me how that compares to previous years.
That may have been something I omitted for the sake of brevity in my summary.
Which I appreciate, thank you. And it's okay if you want to look at it, because we've got a couple other presenters. We may come back around to that one. Sergeant?
I should be able to get it here.
Okay.
So I have the stats for impaired driving for Regina Police Service as a whole, with 1,026 impaired driving calls for service, resulted in 374 drivers being charged. 229 of those were with exceed 08 and 65 for refusal, but there's no mention in the overall statistics in relation to previous years. I do have the previous years for the traffic safety unit, and those are up from 2019 with breath tests and license suspensions.
And do you think that's to higher incidents or just higher reporting?
It's difficult to say. All of these calls come into our dispatch center, and sometimes it's a little bit of right place, right time, or more detailed information provided by somebody who reports an impaired driver, which leads to a successful apprehension.
Okay, thank you. Up in the Northwest, in terms of calls on traffic specific, it may have been brought to council's attention recently that on the Northwest, specifically 9th Avenue North and around the areas of Courtney and 9th, have you seen a higher volume of calls? And it's okay if you don't have that kind of drill down data, but it's more generally speaking, are you getting more phone calls from certain areas of the city than others?
Yes, always, but, and that's speaking from outside the North District. We have some specific areas that we're focusing on that may be addressed by the South report. Places where people like to congregate typically when the weather warms up, and we're, as a traffic unit, speaking, kind of outside the umbrella of the North District, but we're well aware of where those areas are and have plans to focus on those areas in quite heavily this summer.
I have another question in terms of how do we collect data for speeding? Are we limited? Councillor Brasciani's kind of questioning, are we limited to, clearly patrol is one of them, but the cameras that we have in place, are we limited there?
In what way?
Well, so from a smart city sensor perspective, there are sensors that you can attach to light poles that actually can send you data on
Yes,
consistency. Do we have anything like that?
we do. It's called a Black Cat,
Okay.
and it's an unmanned radar unit that has a battery. You mount it to any fixed object. It's secured there so it can't be stolen, and it collects data. And that helps us better deploy police officers to an area. For example, we'll get a call from a citizen concerned about speeding in their area. We set up the Black Cat for a week or some period of time, bring it back to the office, analyze the data, and that'll tell us with statistical evaluation when there's a problem with speeding, so we can best deploy our members there. If it's near a school, for example, and it's after school that we have a problem with speeding, then we can have an officer sit there at that particular time, not all day waiting for something to happen.
Mayor, I think the sky's the limit when it comes to things like that. Like, it's as much as the city wants to focus on, because it doesn't have to be focused on through the police service. You can do environmental curbing, traffic curbing changes that change the flow of traffic or slow or reduce the speed. You can measure traffic response. You can put more automated speed enforcement in. So there really is a lot of different opportunities. Rather than posting police officers out at an intersection, that can be effective because the benefit of having police officers out there is that immediate pull over and change in behavior. Getting a ticket 2 weeks later in the mail from an automated enforcement process doesn't change the behavior in the same way. There's a bit of a delay there, but the way, just as Ian's talked about, the ability to monitor traffic speed, the amount of traffic through intersections, cities have lots of things at their disposal to do that outside of using the police and police resources.
I'm glad you brought that up. What is the relationship like with traffic and bylaw enforcement relative to, say, this issue?
I think good, and I'm looking at Laura Lee. Laura Lee's done some work, I think, on that traffic committee with the city, and I think it's good. I think sometimes, there becomes a little bit of a, I don't want to say jurisdictional battle, but between the city and SGI. Like, SGI runs the automated speed enforcement, for example, and so the city kind of does the brunt of the work, but really it's an SGI program. And so, everybody's got to work in tandem for things to work efficiently and effectively. It's not just the city and the Regina Police Service. SGI is really an important partner in that as well.
You good? I'm just looking at Deputy Chief.
Yeah, I think the chief, summed that up succinctly. I think the relationship with bylaw is something that still can be developed further. We don't typically work super closely with bylaw unless there are maybe specific issues related to a specific address. We do work with bylaw in relation to housing standards through that work with residences that maybe aren't safe, but I think in terms of traffic and that type of work, I think that's something that definitely in the future we could look at developing more collaboration.
Thank you. Last question is about an aerial unit, and in terms of again, I understand volume of calls for service, and that's where patrol is deployed, and patrol's availability for things like traffic and other non-priority calls, essentially, differential priority calls create things. What does the aerial unit help, say, in the north in terms of some of this? Does it help with traffic? Can it help with property crimes?
Absolutely. It's basically up to the imagination of the membership that will be looking after that unit. But I can already think of, I'll just give you a specific example, drag racing on Anaquod Road. Very difficult to enforce because it's a wide open area. So if you put a police car in the area, the activity stops, but only while the police car's in the area. If we have a aerial surveillance of that area, we can have the police cars out of sight and then enforce from the air. It would direct the members to the proper area. We've also done projects with unconventional vehicles and surveillance for these types of activities, and that will continue. And in regards to property crime, I mean, one only has to watch, crime TV to see how an aerial unit with, say, an infrared camera can apprehend somebody from a property crime and surveil them from the air. So quite excited about the opportunities that that's going to present.
That drag racing comment was music to Councillor Bresciani's ears. Anyways, thank you very much for the presentation. Most appreciated. I think we can go up next if you like, Chief.
Sure, sounds good. So while we're switching, I think we've got Staff Sergeant Criddle coming up. I will just thank Sergeant Barr. We do have a couple of our inspectors away this week because of some critical incident commander training, which has been very, very hard to get. So when we were able to get a couple of weeks for members to go, we were happy to send them. But as a result, we've had to bring a few different people in to help us with that. So Ian Barr, his day job is he's one of the he's the sergeant in charge of our combined traffic safety service, and as I mentioned, he's spent many years working in traffic, and so appreciate that. So as we move to the South District, Staff Sergeant Guy Criddle is here to present, and Staff Sergeant Criddle, a longtime member, over 20 years with our police service, has worked in a variety of different areas. Including major crimes, spent a stint in there as an investigator, is the staff sergeant right now in the South District, but is actually moving in a week over to investigative services to take on an important role there with family services, vice, and a few different investigative areas. So Guy Criddle will be presenting the South District report. Turn it over to Guy.
Good morning, Your Worship, councillors, and board members. I'm presenting you today with the 2021 year-end South District report. Community Service Division South District encompasses the area south of Victoria Avenue, east of Winnipeg Street, and west of Albert Street to the city limits. Patrol District itself is broken down into 4 main zones, those being the southeast, south, southwest, and east. Geographical area that these patrol zones encompass continues to grow in the south and the Harbour Landing development in the southeast with the Creeks, Creekside, and Greens on Gardner developments. The South District is one of the fastest growing areas in the city. And it's overseen by 1 inspector and 1 staff sergeant who are responsible for the oversight of the South District members within 4 patrol shifts. The School Resource Program, the Regina Intersectoral Partnership, TRIP, and Hub, and the Police and Crisis Team, which is PACT. Criminal activity within the Regina, city of Regina is broken down into basically 2 categories: crimes against property and crimes against the person. So property crime, when we look at property crime in the South District in 2021, it accounted for 39.7% of reported property crime in the city of Regina. This is down actually from 1.13% from 2020. Of the 4 zones in the South District, the Southeast zone accounted for the highest number of events at 40.76% of all property crimes in the district. Southwest zone had the fewest number of reported property crimes in the district at 15.80%. So looking at a 3-year comparison, in 2021, the South District experienced increases in break and enter and theft of auto offenses, with decreases in theft from auto and mischief offenses as compared to 2020. When we look at crimes against the person in the South District, in 2021, it accounted for 29.7% of reported crimes against the person in the City of Regina, which is down 1.3% from 2020. Of the 4 zones in the South District, the Southeast Zone accounted for the highest number of events at 33.48% of all crimes against the person in the district. In total, the South District saw a 3.69% increase in assault offenses and 16.13% increase in robbery offenses in 2021 compared to 2020. Moving on to the school resource program for the 2020-2021 academic year, there were 14 school resource officers for 14 schools, 81 elementary schools, and approximately 10 alternate schools and programs. One of the 14 officers is dedicated to teaching full-time with a law, public safety, and security class at Campus Regina Public. Another officer is assigned to the Scott Police Academy and is the SRO for Scott Collegiate. The Scott Police Academy is a program collaboratively created by Regina Public Schools and the Regina Police Service. The program is designed to attract motivated students from all parts of the school division who are interested in the field of law enforcement. The academy itself is open to students from all areas of Regina. Scott Police Academy targets its recruiting to the grade 8 population in Scott Collegiate feeder schools. The program has 16 grade 10 students and 25 grade 9 students participating in the program. So when we talk about feeder schools, we're talking about the surrounding area or the surrounding schools in North Central primarily. So in addition to the regular duties, school resource officers completed 262 presentations. These presentations include topics around cyberbullying, drugs, domestic violence, gangs, and cyberbullying along the lines of some of the cyberbullying that goes on in social media. There were 23 lockdown drills. This was a decrease actually of 66.7% from 2019 and 2020. There were 29 community events, but due to COVID, those events were down a little bit, but we were still involved in quite a few events considering. And there were 55 violent threat risk assessments. This was an increase of 60% as compared to the 2019-2020 school year. So the next section that I'd like to talk about that's under the umbrella of the South District is the Regina Intersectoral Partnership, known as TRIP. TRIP is a multi-sector collaborative risk-driven initiative designed to improve community safety and well-being in Regina. TRIP is made up of a Children 11 and Under initiative and the 12 and Up initiative. TRIP is a shared commitment by multiple human service agencies, including the Ministry of Social Services, Ministry of Justice, Saskatchewan Health Authority, the Regina Public and Catholic School Boards, and the Regina Police Service. It functions out of the Regina Public School Board office, and stakeholders provide the financial and in-kind staff resources. Regina Police Service has one full-time corporal who happens to be here today, a part-time strategist, and a weekly commitment from involved school resource officers supporting the work at TRIP. By focusing on coordinated service support and the reduction of barriers to pro-social activities, TRIP aims to generate risk reduction and ultimately reduce the vulnerability of children and their families through improved communication and collaboration among service providers. So some of the stats in regards to TRIP. In 2021, TRIP received 46 referrals for 11 and under, and 57 referrals for 12 and up, for a total of 103 referrals. This represents a 63.5% increase over the previous year. As of December 31st, 2021, TRIP had 75 active files and held 488 conferences with families during the calendar year. This is a 133.5% increase in case conferences over the previous year. TRIP has a capability and the expertise in the current mobilization of multi-sector resources to generate impact on our identified outcomes. One of the greatest strengths of TRIP is the positive working relationship developed amongst key stakeholders and families, which translates into the positive impacts with clients. So moving on to the Regina Hub. The Hub is a partnership between the Regina Police Service, Saskatchewan Health Authority, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Corrections and Policing, Ministry of Social Services, Regina Housing Authority, and Fox Valley Counseling Services. Regina Police Service has a position within the Hub working committee and plays an active role in trying to identify those individuals in our community who present an acutely elevated risk in 5 main categories, which include mental health, alcohol and drugs, criminal involvement, parenting, antisocial, negative behavior. From January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021, the Hub table collaborated on 98 referrals that met the elevated risk threshold. The Regina Police Service made 54 referrals to the Hub and was the lead agency on 48 of those 54 referrals. So moving on to the Police and Crisis Team, also referred to as PACT. It strives to improve police crisis team responses to vulnerable people experiencing a mental illness and or addiction concern. PACT is created and maintains a network between the Regina Police Service and the Saskatchewan Health Authority. This network also includes a number of community partners to maintain an environment of trust and support to produce better outcomes for people in crisis. Some of the stats in regards to PACT: in 2021, PACT was involved in 2,301 case files. Of those cases, 1,224 clients were risk reviewed and documented by PACT with no further action required. 1,077 people required a crisis intervention where a mental health or risk assessment was conducted. Of those 1,077 clients who required intervention, 52 of them were taken to the hospital for psychiatric treatment or other medical services. 313 clients were referred to community health services. 311 clients were referred to other agencies and community programs. 90 clients declined services. 110 were diverted from the emergency department and referred to other services in the community. 48 people diverted arrest as a result of PACT intervention. When statistics are compared from 2017 to 2021, total PACT interactions increased from 1,006 to 2,301 interactions, which was a 128% increase. So over the past 5 years, the amount of people PACT has interacted with has more than doubled, while the size of the unit has remained the same. Mental illness and persons in crisis have become a significant factor in calls for service for the Regina Police Service. That's the end of my report. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have with the assistance of the subject matter experts that I brought here today. Sergeant Kurczynski from SROs, Sergeant Wild from PACT, and Corporal Cole Lawson from TRIP.
Thank you very much, Staff Sergeant. Councillor Brashiani, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Mayor. So the South District is the Southeast Zone accounted for the highest number of events, which was the 40.76% of all property crimes. It was also the highest in crimes against person in the Southeast.
That's right.
And so I guess what is our, let's see here. So when we look at just the property crimes alone, the Southeast was 40. The other ones in the Southeast were 27, 15, like they were almost half reduced. Right. What is the reason for that?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to really say what the reason is for it. I mean, we know that the South, as I stated, is a very fast-growing community. I would say that crime fluctuates. It's not consistent. And to say specifically what the reason is for that, I think that'd be difficult to ascertain what the reason is. I can tell you that we, of course, deal or keep an eye on those types of statistics and deal, and come up with strategies to deal with those types of statistics. So again, we have weekly information compiled by Strategic Services identifying those high crime areas. based on that information, we do weekly tactical coordination plans, and we target those areas. So we'll do extra patrols in those areas as time permits, those types of things. And a really good example of some of the things that we're doing to deal with some of those crimes would be the Chuka Boulevard problem that we've been having with vehicles racing up and down there. We've had some really strong coordinated efforts down there for the past 3 weeks where we've laid quite a few charges and have dealt with some of the youth that are hanging around there quite a bit, not only from in town, but from out of town. So those are some of the strategies that we, as a police service, are always paying attention to, and that we're always directing our focus in those areas of high crime, high traffic problems, those types of things. So I think to say, what is the reason for that, I think is really difficult to pinpoint. I don't know if the chief would have anything to add to that.
I think
John?
Deputy Chief Davies will have something to add.
Certainly. I think, Councillor, that historically that has been the relationship, in terms of crime in the South area. And I think it has a lot to do with how we have the boundaries defined for southeast versus southwest. I mean, the southeast is a very large geographic area, and as Staff Sergeant Criddle mentioned, in terms of growing population. And so I think if you were saying per person is crime in the southeast, out of control compared to anywhere else in the city, that wouldn't be the case. It's just the way that we report it geographically. It is such a large area that it typically is the highest reported for crimes against person and crimes against property. If you look at the South District compared to the rest of the city, it's not out of line with what we've seen with crime comparisons year over year. It really is very stable. And so for the last, probably as long as we've been doing those reports, that Southeast is always a little bit greater than the other two areas. And I think that it mainly is pointed to the geographic size of that specific zone. And, I know we talked about last meeting about looking at our boundary review. That's a piece of work that's ongoing. And certainly that's something that we'll be looking at is in terms of calls for service. Are we deploying officers appropriately? And should some of those zones and boundaries be redistributed to make them a little bit, more equal in terms of size or population? So we're definitely digging into that this year. And, maybe next year that report will look a little bit different in terms of the geographic breakdown of the South.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you for that. And thank you for the Chuka Boulevard work as well. I know residents really appreciate that. In regards to the South, has also taken on all of the resource program, the TRIP, the PAC, the hub. Is there extra resources that goes into making sure that okay, so
Yes.
there is? Okay.
Yeah, those don't take away from the patrol numbers.
Okay.
The patrol resources are separate from that, but essentially, what we try and do is everybody needs a home. So, TRIP, PACT, the hub, they have to fall under somewhere. And as you see, you just heard from the North District, they have traffic, Crime Stoppers and community programs there. So the South has some of these TRIP and hub programs, and you'll hear from Central coming up, which has community engagement, the BEAT program. So
Okay.
each district, just to distribute the workload, but each of those areas has specific resources attached to it. Now, hub, for example, Sherry Wild does most of the work for hub. PACT is a little bit bigger team, but as you know, you've been involved in discussions. We could always expand that if we could get the province to expand with us. And even TRIP, which is, incredible work that is being done to not only deter youth from the criminal justice system, but really put their lives and their families' lives on a better path. We have one person, and that's Corporal Cole Lawson, who's here, that does that work. So it is different resources from patrol, but it's not big teams of people because resources are at a premium in the police service.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's very important. In regards to on that the TRIP and the PACT, those programs, is there a wait list for these vitally important programs?
I can speak to that
Do we
actually.
know?
Cole, would you like to come up and speak to that?
Actually, Counselor, I sit on the steering committee for TRIP, and we just had our meeting yesterday, and so I have the updated statistics. If you just give me one
Cole,
second.
Cole, you can sit down.
You're off the hook, Cole. I know the staff sergeant
Cole,
was
he was
willing to
ready
get you
to
down here
come up and
fast.
He's here for a reason.
There are currently 43 people on the wait list for TRIP. That number has doubled in the last month. And from 16 months ago, we had 0 on the wait list. We're now up to 43. It really speaks to, I think people signaled post-COVID, people are trying to get connected with resources. But it really is, it speaks to the lack of capacity that we have with our TRIP team. And so because it is multi-sector, we're reaching out to our partners and we're hoping to discuss what growth looks like for that program. As the chief mentioned, Cole looks at every one of those files. He does an in-depth assessment, probably 4 hours on each referral. And so, that backlog and that 43 really is a large number, and it really is concerning because these are families that need support and need connection to services. And so, it's the report that we got yesterday. It really is concerning for us, and we need to think about what growth and expansion looks like with that program.
You know, I think an important thing to add to that, Deputy Chief, is that not only are they families that need support, but they want support. The real main factor in the TRIP work that we do is families are putting their hands up asking for help. So, sometimes you'll run into a situation where a family needs help, but they don't want help, or they're not welcoming an outside service provider to come in and help. But in the case of TRIP, these are families that are asking for help. So, it's very hard for Cole and for the other people that are involved in this when you've got a family that needs help and yet resources are not there to necessarily intervene the way we need to.
So just to elaborate on that, then what does that mean? So you go out and try and build, how do you try and shorten that? I mean, you've only got Cole. So what is the, and is there anything more the city can do, or how does that work? Is it with the school divisions, I would assume, or?
So it's multi-sector, so both school divisions, we have health, social services, justice, RPS. In terms of RPS, what we've done is created a little bit of a different process where our PACT or our hub team and our TRIP are going to be backing each other up now. We just put that into place within the last month. So that's going to help us from the RPS perspective to ensure that we always have somebody there to be evaluating those files. But it is each agency has to look within to see if they can dedicate more resources, because that's really where the backlog is just the capacity for the team members to be able to take a look at those referrals and then supply those services to the clients. If you ask if there's a role for the city, I would say definitely yes. Our steering committee meeting yesterday was about how can we bring in other partners to the table so that we can expand that capacity. And so I think that there's a lot of discussion that, we can carry forward after this meeting to figure out what that might look like. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that. And everybody in that group and school divisions, are they aware that there's a wait list then? They would be
Yes.
aware? Okay.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
everybody's bringing together. Okay, thank you for that. And just the VTRA, 55, it's increased by 60%. I think I read that right, compared to 2019 and 20. Can you just elaborate like that? I mean, that's the violent risk assessments. So what does that 60% mean? Because it's quite high.
Jarrett, do you want to speak? I can speak a little bit to it, just based on some of the
Sure.
information I have, but Jarrett can elaborate on it. But I think a lot of it has to do with COVID and with social media, the activity on social media, hey? Would you say?
Yeah, so thank you for the question, and thank you, Staff Sergeant Criddle. We have seen a very large increase in the VTRA process. That 55 or 60-some% compared to last year is actually higher now. We're closer to double, if not more than double. I think a big part, and I mean, I'm just speculating, but I think a big part of that reason has to do with the fact that a lot of children were out of school for close to 2 years. We're finding that a lot of the VITRA process, the kids that we're dealing with are the grade 8 to 10. And it seems that, you know, coming back into school, coming to high school, not knowing how to interact with other children has really thrown things for a loop. And it's resulted in a lot of threatenings and fights and things like that. We've seen a very large increase in the VITRA process, and that number would be echoed by the other members of the VITRA process, such as the school board and the social services, all those partners that are involved in that process. It's been very taxing on our resources in our section. I counted 1 week just before Christmas, actually. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I personally was involved in 14 VITRAs in 1 week. So my entire week was involved in that process. So it has been a very large increase. As you'll see also, you know, that large increase has also coincided with less presentations, less lockdown drills, all of those types of typical proactive things that we would do within the school resource section. A lot of that has gone down because we simply haven't been in the schools to do them. So, you know, it's become a little bit more of a reactive type of spot.
Thank you. So with that, and it's on the rise, and you said it's doubled more than that. What is the support mechanism for these students then?
And that's, I think, exactly what we were just talking about with TRIP. The school resource program is probably one of the biggest sections that would do TRIP referrals to Corporal Lawson. So as our VITRA process increases and the amount of students that we have going through that process increases, it then generates more people sent to the TRIP program or to the HUB program. So it really comes down to a matter of resources. The more people that we have working in these sections and the more help that we have, the more we're able to help look after these kids.
Okay, yeah. And thank you for that.
For sure.
And the work. Last question is Arcola Avenue. And Arcola Avenue has been designated, there's some Fs, meaning that certain locations, so University Park Drive and Arcola, also merging off the bridge onto Arcola has been a major accident. And when SGI flags it and says you got to do something, it's the only merging off ramp that they've put a stop sign. Police are always there, and every time I see an accident. So where does police ever come back to, or does SGI, or to say, listen, there is going to be a fatality, or we know those intersections are done, and we're on, you know, a study is coming, but what more? I don't think there's anything more that can be done there, because I think police come after they're called or when there's an accident. But is there a concern from police around the safety on Arcola as to the increase of accidents? Because it's become a regular occurrence.
Well, thanks for the question. Absolutely. I mean, there is a concern. I know that we've done several traffic projects in that area for that reason. There were a number of accidents actually just this past winter where it was just every day there were problems there. So in terms of some of the information that we're passing on to SGI, I would imagine that SGI would be aware of that, and I'm not sure in our conversations with them.
For sure, yeah, for sure they are, and you know, I remember a conversation that we had, and this is not going to be news to anyone, but the reality is, if you drive east or you're heading out from downtown on Arcola at the end of the day, you see the volume of traffic. That is really just indicative of the growth that has happened in that area, and infrastructure that wasn't set up necessarily anticipating that type of growth. So you think about the off-ramp coming off of Ring Road onto Arcola Avenue, there's a stop sign there. Well, you don't have a very big distance to get from that stop sign into the far left lane if you're trying to turn onto University Park Drive. That's inevitably what causes a lot of the problems. So, you know, I'm not trying to create road work for the city, but at the end of the day, we likely need an expansion of the lanes and some sort of alternative that can divert traffic or allow people to make an access there that doesn't cause them to, for lack of a better term, do California lane changes through a very short distance to get over there. And that's why that University Park Drive in Arcola has been a tragic intersection in this city for Dean's entire career. And that's the longest that I can quote you in this room.
That's like forever, right?
Forever. Thank you, and I just want to say thank you for the work. Appreciate it, the report.
So yeah, I think, quickly just to answer your question, I think it is collaborative work that has to be done with the city because it's, you talk about environmental changes that can increase traffic safety. That's probably one area where it needs to be looked at.
Commissioner Bushi.
Questions, and I just want one clarification. Deputy Chief Davis, when you explained the reasons why there were 43 people on the waiting list for TRIP, is it as a result of, say, more people needing those services and some administrative issues as well? I mean, having just one person and maybe operational issues as well. Is it a combination of both, or just we're seeing more people needing services? Is that correct?
We're seeing more referrals, definitely.
referrals?
That's what's creating the backlog. Our TRIP has been staffed with one corporal since the inception of TRIP, and that corporal really does the front end work on those referrals in terms of triaging, determining if they're a good fit for TRIP. But really, post-COVID, the number of referrals have just skyrocketed. Like I said, 16 months ago, we had 0 referrals, zero on the wait list. So that's really, we just don't have the capacity currently to deal with the number of people that are requesting our assistance.
Okay, thank you. My first question is for PACT. You did mention that there has been, again, increase in clients. However, there's just same number of staff in terms of our officers. I'm asking this because I'm a little bit concerned about, like, does that pose some danger to a society if we don't have, or what are some of the challenges that you face, given that more people? Again, I don't know. I'm just looking at this also in healthcare, right, where we have, especially with COVID and with pandemic, we have a lot of people needing help, but the staffing is still the same. In an ideal world, what would you expect, or what would be ideal situation?
For sure. So our numbers have doubled, but our staff hasn't changed, but we still don't have a wait list.
Okay.
So we're still getting to the people in crisis that our patrol frontline people are dealing with, and then they're trying to triage to us. So we mitigate a lot of that. Where the lag kind of comes in is us then triaging to other service providers. So there's longer wait times to get into psychiatrist appointment, addictions counseling, bed closures due to COVID, for social detox and any kind of programming. So we will, in PACT, we've had to hang on to clients longer than typical because we still want to support them up until they can get that next connection. Because PACT really is the connector for these people. We don't case manage individuals, but we will stay with them and provide supports for them. So the amount of work that we're doing, in essence, has doubled because we're having to get our new referrals, but we still have our people from last week, the week before, 3 weeks before, that still don't have their connections that we feel comfortable letting them continue on. And so we're managing that on top of the increase in the mental illness in the community and the crystal meth that's kind of bringing police involvement into them. So we're working with that. And then we're also now being asked to help other agencies who are also at their limit with wait limits. They're calling, other providers are calling us, asking if we can help and assist and keep these people safe for up until they can get to their other appointments. So like sometimes the clients, the number is the same, but the amount of work we're involved with is definitely double. So, I mean, more PACT, yes, because we can get to more people and do more, but there has to be other providers who are also willing to kind of speed that up or take that on as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. And my next question, again, keeping in mind that, of course, officers are not solely mental health experts, and of course, they rely on, like you've mentioned, other providers as well. I just wanted to know, so Staff Sergeant, when you did your report, there was 90 clients you said declined services. Can you explain to me, or can you help me out? What's the scenario like? Like why would
Why would they decline services?
Yeah, 90 people.
Well, that again would be probably a
Yeah, I can answer that.
a
Right.
question.
So our services are voluntary. We can't make
Okay.
anybody accept the services that we're offering them. We can apprehend if we believe them to be
Right.
unwell.
Okay.
So we do have the power to do that, but really, ideally, we want the people to choose the options for themselves because they're going to have a higher success rate. So we could attend and talk to somebody who is maybe just having a bad day, recently lost their job, relationship breakdown. We can visit with them and offer them services. Keeping in mind, a lot of people have the ability to manage a lot of their stress on their own. So we will offer services, and if they decline, that's okay. If it's to the point where we believe that they're not well and something else has to happen, then we use other powers. But people do have a right to decline our services.
Absolutely.
Some of these people have no contact previously with police, but due to the nature of their job loss and the current stressful situation, they got into a fight with their spouse and police were called. So we're offering services to people that likely could take them if they want, but they have other avenues that they can use to kind of continue to get support without the help of PACT. So again, and those numbers go up and down every year on who declines. It's their right to decline our services.
No, thank you you for that explanation. It makes me feel a little bit settled to know that there is sort of a follow-up as well.
Absolutely.
And great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Boucher. Commissioner Duncan.
Thank you so much for your report. I have a couple questions about the Regina Hub. So I'd actually never heard of this before, but so is it a physical location or more of a virtual information sharing network?
Well, I'm going to refer to Sherry again because she knows all about Hub and she's the subject matter expert for sure on that.
We meet twice a week at the Mama Wiyatatin Center. There is no one-stop kind of shop place that a person can come to get connected to all the services that we have. So each agency brings referrals forward. We all meet in person and discuss kind of whether they meet that elevated risk and then what our plan is after that. So although we're meeting in person twice a week, somebody who wants to self-refer to Hub doesn't have a place necessarily that they can go, but they can talk to each individual agency that sits at Hub and a referral can be made.
And so it sounds like this is led by the government of Saskatchewan as kind of a wraparound service delivery model. Are they using any type of predictive analytics, or is it simply sharing information you have and making assumptions on that? Like, are you guys kind of looking at the data and running, algorithms to, or is there potential for that? Is that kind of?
Do you want to speak or?
So it is a referral-based service, so each agency will bring their referrals. From a policing perspective, our patrol officers would provide referrals. Over the weekend, we went to 4 calls for service at this address. We think they need connection to services. They'd let Sherry know she could bring it forward. In terms of predictive analytics or anything, that's certainly not anything that's been discussed or brought forward. Regina is just one hub center within the province. It really was the brainchild of now Chief in Edmonton, Dale McPhee, but Prince Albert was the start of the hub model across the country. And so Saskatoon, Regina, Prince Albert.
There's 15 different hub teams
in the province. And there are oversight bodies. Again, I sit on the steering committee for Hub. But yeah, we haven't sort of talked about who might need our services in the future. It is referral based.
I do think predictive analytics is something, and Yashu perhaps could talk to this more knowledgeably, but I think it's something that the province is more and more leaning towards. Deputy Chief Ray and I are involved in some work with a provincial drug task force, and they're using hotspotting, predictive analytics to try and not necessarily, I guess, make best use of resources as they can, where there's some problem areas, and almost proactively try and put resources in an area to prevent further problems from happening. But just to reinforce what Laura Lee said, I think right now our hub process and the hub processes in Saskatchewan are very much reactive to elevated risk problems, personal or familial elevated risk problems that exist, and how can we go in there and deal with that.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, no, yeah, I just saw Yashu pop up, so I don't know if he has anything to say on that, but I mean, it's something to consider. I think obviously there's some sensitivities around profiling, but yeah. Last question would be, other than funding, what you mentioned, is there any limitations to this, the Regina Hub approach that you can think of?
Do you want me to, I can speak.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, our numbers have increased for Hub. There's a lot of gaps in services right now. So people who might have been connected to one thing, it's kind of fallen through and they now need 4 or 5 other supports because things have deteriorated. But Hub does not case manage. And so we will hang on to the family or to the individual until we make the connections for them. But it's really up to the individual to maintain those connections. And we've seen very quickly that lasts maybe 3 to 6 months and these people are being re-referred. So police, in essence, are taking on some of that case manager role where we're trying to, mitigate them from coming through Hub again and doing a little extra work to keep the person connected. But a case management piece is important. And also police are the drivers of Hub in that many agencies aren't necessarily willing to pick these people up for rides, get them to appointments. Like there's transportation limitations. These individuals and families don't have access to telephone, internet. During COVID, it was very difficult because everything was kind of, a telehealth or a tele-appointment. And so police, in essence, were driving and letting people use their phone for the purposes of a telehealth appointment. And not all agencies that sit at the Hub table would be comfortable, nor would that be in their mandate. So police have been filling gaps. So, I mean, there's some limitations to it. And then measuring results is really difficult as well, because how do you say somebody's successful? What does success look like? That they made it to their appointment or they've kept their house for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? Like it's really hard to measure that. So I think they're in the middle of trying to look at some data to see what actually are the results of Hub and where can we better provide services so that there's more, in essence, success, but just less people coming back through and maybe us just giving those supports to them and they continue on and they don't need support services from other people.
So there is, just to add further to Sherry's comments, there is a possibility of some funding for a case management staff person that we're looking into right now collaboratively through the Hub. But as you mentioned, in an ideal world, if there was a place where all these services were under one roof, that, certainly that further breaks down silos and barriers and does make it a one-stop shop for community members. I mean, Sherry and I talk about in an ideal world, what would that look like? And that's certainly something that I think would be a huge benefit to the community. It's gonna obviously take some time to get there.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Commissioner Duncan. I feel like clearing up a little piece of history here. How long has the Hub table been around?
2018.
How long's TRIP been around? 11 years?
2015.
Have I got that right? 11?
No, earlier than that, as a guy, yeah, it was like 2008 or 9. Yeah.
So the Hub model is actually predicated upon TRIP's model. So with all due respect to Police Chief McVie,
Yeah.
and I realized he did used to work here, but the TRIP model is the original model for multi-intersectoral partnership and the triage into other services. Have I got that right?
If former Chief Troy Hagan were here, he would be very proud to hear you say that because that is right. I think that model, that TRIP model, really occurred without much fanfare for many years, and even now it's got more notoriety. But the reality is, I don't know that there's still the investment that needs to be made, and that's not just from our police service. In fact, I would argue it's from many of the other partners. But both of those are great programs, and I'm going to give our police service a little bit of credit with regard to the inception of Hub here. Yes, Hub existed elsewhere, but with Hub, the Hub table in Regina was really the Regina Police Service was very instrumental in getting that up and running here, because we were one of the last communities to actually have the Hub table here, and so there was a lot of work done. And you see that even with the referrals. We talk about referrals. Our police service plays a leadership role when it comes to the number of referrals that are taken into Hub and the number of lead agency opportunities that we take when we work through that. And I think it's just because we see these issues firsthand every day, and it allows us to really understand what opportunities exist in the community to better help people rather than just a police intervention. And it's really a form of holding one another accountable. Sitting at that hub table, it's hard not to say that's not ours to handle when it clearly is a mental health issue or an addictions or a housing or whatever. There's all of those partners at the table, and so it really is a way to hold one another accountable.
I agree. Just gonna give some shout outs to the TRIP program because anyways, more people should know that. In terms of the Regina Hub, okay, so, and I think Commissioner Duncan, you were getting to this. I do know, and you actually might end up talking yet, Sergeant Lawson. There is currently a review in terms of the TRIP interventions with youth in terms of what that looks like down the road. And I know that you work with a researcher in order to determine that. Have we ever done that for Hub in terms of how we measure success for Hub?
Yeah, they just kind of wrapped up. This is where it's difficult because a lot of our clients are transient, and so the ministry had brought forward an assessment tool and a company to come in and measure, in essence, that success. I'm going to tell you 70% of the people that, for sure, that we've referred are very transient, and so it relied on survey and input from those people, which we couldn't locate. And so police, in essence, went out and found people to ask them if there was a success or, what they felt value from the hub. And the answer is really a lot of people struggled because the connections were there, but then once they were housed and supported, they couldn't maintain that on their own, and then they don't know where to go to ask, and eventually it would kind of come back to police as a call for service, and we'd generate another referral. So I can't say it's not successful because I've experienced many successes. However, the people that we're generally dealing with, it's a complex, multifaceted, they need a lot of wraparound supports with like kind of a gradual step. Like in essence, we're coming in hot with a lot of this help and support, but then once they've got those connections, there really is nobody else. And so that's why a TRIP and having a case manager and a team would be more viable than just us connecting. But everybody that sits at the hub table is doing it off the corner of their desk. There is nobody that's assigned a full-time position just to sit on hub. And so again, that's where there's difficulties. We don't always have representation from mental health or addictions. It just depends on the week and the staffing levels and if there's backup. So there's lots of hurdles within our own, cohort of agencies on top of the barriers that clients face on a daily basis trying to just get connected.
Agreed. You may have answered a portion of this question, but can you clearly state the connection between VITRA and TRIP? How much do those intersect?
They intersect all the time. I listened to Sherry talking about the hub program. Essentially, the VITRA program is the hub program for students. It's done at a different level. There's a few different rules surrounding it. You have to have a parental consent. But essentially, it's the same type of thing involving the same partners. It's just done within the school setting, and it's done for students.
And how many folks you come across in VITRA that end up in the TRIP program?
More than half.
Okay, so I'll actually just provide a few comments because this is all sort of starts to funnel together. Speaking of working together, the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan that was approved has a coordinated access to services element of it, which is one of the 6 areas of scope that the city was told, hey, you need to pay attention to coordinated access to services. In terms of some of the summits we've been holding for these scope areas, what continues to come around over and over again is some fashion of centralized intake in order to not break the bonds or that relationship that gets established, whether that relationship is established through food, through shelter, through, frankly, PAC team, through VITRA, through TRIP, like pick one. And so I guess this is the police notice that you're probably going to be significantly involved, just even in terms of feeding information and ideas into that coordinated access to services, but also the community safety element of the scope within that. So I think there's going to end up being place for everything, but I know my conversations with Trip, with Wendy and Lance has been very much also handled off the corner of individuals' desks within the ministries, and so really trying to get some focus, but I'm not sure, I'm just not hearing the same thing 3 times or 4 times over between the hub and Beecher and Trip over and over again, that some dedicated resources may be the answer from justice, health, social services. I'll throw finance in there, just kidding. But that element that I think we all keep saying the same thing, and I think there's more force behind if the city and ourselves and some of the agencies can actually bring together the plan that looks to solve multiple issues at the same time. So that's what I'll offer. And I think it goes back to your point earlier, Councilor Bresciani as well, which is how do we help? I think it's within that. I think it's sort of bubbling up to the surface now anyways. So thank you very much for all of that information for those reports. And before you move off, actually, I'm going to tell you that the importance of the school resource officer, probably in that programming, has probably never been highlighted more than some of the data that you've given us today. So thanks very much for that. Really appreciate it. That's it for questions from council on South, or sorry, from commission on South.
Sure. So as we're transitioning our speakers, I'm just going to thank all of our speakers today. Cole, don't be slighted you didn't get up here. But you know, I think it's important for me to articulate how proud we are of all of these leaders in our organization. Each one of these leaders that are here today, they bring a wealth of expertise. I look at someone like Cole, who's a brand new corporal, just promoted recently, a member of our SWAT team. Sherry, you've seen and heard from as a resident expert with Hub, with the work that she does with PACT is incredible. Was a member of our community engagement unit for years as a leader there, and you're going to hear from Brad in a second about the work they do. Jared, a member of our crisis negotiator team, and now is in charge of our school program. And I talked about Guy being a longtime great investigator, worked in major crimes, also a member of the SWAT team for many years. Also interesting to note, both Jared and Guy are second generation Regina Police Service officers. Their fathers were both police officers with our police service. So there's a lot of pride when we look at these incredible leaders who are speaking with you today, and appreciate the work that they do for us. And speaking of that, Inspector Brad Walter is our newest inspector with our police service, just promoted early in 2022. An incredible history with our police service as well. Worked in a lot of different areas and is one of the lead, still carrying one of the lead project workers with our new headquarters build. We felt it was important to have an actual police officer attached to that as well as other members, because of the fact that, you know, when you're putting together a new building and a new facility, it's important that it's responsive to the needs of the people that are working there. So Brad's done a lot of incredible work there, and now is the inspector in charge of our central district, and is here to give us the central report. So I'll turn it over to Brad.
Good afternoon, Mayor Masters and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to report on the Central District year-end report for 2021. Central District consists of the North Central community, the Heritage community, and the downtown core. These communities include venues such as Everest Place, Mosaic Stadium, and Victoria Park. And the Central District is divided into 2 patrol zones, the North Central Zone and the South Central Zone. The resources for the Central District consists of 1 inspector and 1 staff sergeant. We currently have 68 patrol members assigned to the Central District, and they're dispersed over 4 patrol shifts. 8 of that number is assigned to our downtown beat. We also have the Community Engagement Unit as part of the Central District, and it is comprised of 2 NCOs, a sergeant and a corporal, and 4 constables. The Central District is similar to all of the other districts. It utilizes crime data to identify areas of concerns or hotspots within the district. And our central staff sergeant uses this data to develop responses and allocate police resources to any of the issues that come up. Specifically for 2021, the results for crimes against property, the Central District accounted for 25% of all property crime reported in the city of Regina. Of the 2 zones, the North Central had 56.5% of that number for the Central District. When we look at a 3-year comparison of crimes against property, all categories decreased. Theft from auto saw a significant decrease from 2019. It was just about half. But we're fairly consistent between 2020 and 2021. Theft of auto decreased 314 in 2019 down to 210 in 2021. And we also saw a decrease in our mischief reported crime. Break and enter decreased in 2020, but then rose again in 2021. Went from 467 in 2020 to 561 people, 561 break and enters. Our crimes against person statistics, Central District accounted for 37.8% of all reported crime against a person in the city of Regina. Again, our North Central zone was slightly higher, 62.96% compared to the South Central District. And we saw a decrease in assaults in the 3-year average. We went from 903 in 2019 down to 856 in 2020, and then back up in 2021 to 913. So things actually increased last year after a short decrease in 2020. And we saw a decrease of robberies of 12%, going from 148 in 2020 down to 130. Those are fairly consistent numbers. The percentages sound higher than the actual numbers reflect. Overall, compared to the other districts, the Central District saw a 1% increase since 2020 in the percentage of occurrence in our district compared to the other districts. But we actually, overall for our district, decreased our occurrences by 13.39%. So all of the districts would have seen a decrease. Ours was just slightly less than some of the other districts. Within the Central District, we have the Community Engagement Unit. Community Engagement Unit continues to play an important role in the Central District. Their goal, as their title says, is to engage the community. So they participate in outreach programs and work with the community to address concerns. They walk what we call the beat, or they do foot patrol. They patrol on bicycles, obviously in the summer and when the weather's permitting. And really it's about getting our members out of the police car and face-to-face with members of the public and to build some relationships. As we've seen everywhere, 2021 continued to be a challenge for us because of the pandemic. It's really difficult to engage in the community when events are being canceled or there's significant restrictions. But we were able to still engage in some programs, such as Copsicle, Cops and Readers, as well as some educational presentations to seniors groups, youth sports teams, and childcare facilities. With the challenge around engagement opportunities, we did utilize the community engagement unit to help in other areas for the police service. They helped provide a police presence, and also some reassurance for the people at Camp Hope. So they would do daily check-ins at Camp Hope, assist other agencies, those kinds of things. So we utilize them in a little bit other ways. And we also have our CEU members serving on some committees. We have one of our members who assists with HUB, and another member who's on the Housing Standards Enforcement team. And lastly, we have the Central District Beat. The Beat operates within our patrol area, but they serve the downtown area specifically. So they will work with downtown partners, including the Regina Business Improvement District, the Cornwall Center, the Regina Public Library, as well as a host of other businesses and agencies. They provide, again, those bicycle patrols, those foot patrols in the downtown area, which helps them to attend events in Victoria Park, Scar Street Mall, the Cornwall Center, and again, engaging people, building those relationships, checking in with businesses. So the Beat's a vital part of our deployment. Overall, for 2021, the Central District saw some positive response to challenges, and we're looking forward to a productive 2022. We're already seeing an increase in the number of community events that our community engagement unit is planning going forward, attending. We have a string of things set up already for May with reading in schools and deploying to businesses where we're serving food and those kinds of things. So 2022 certainly appears to be going in the right direction coming out of 2021. And that's all I have, unless there's some questions.
Commissioner, I'm going to tell you that according to legislation, we have a hard stop in 4 minutes. So I'm going to ask you if you'd like to ask questions now, or you'd like to just break for 15 and come back and ask questions.
Let's finish it.
Break now?
Yeah.
Okay. To that end, you're gonna come back and answer questions, because there are some for you. Commissioner, let's see you back here at 10:41. We'll take our 15-minute break right now. Thanks so much. Recess.
Thank you. Just one question to staff at the Mama-Wheaton Center. So they walk the beat as well during the day, but I understand that there's an intake office there, administration office, kind of. I don't know. Sorry, I forget the name. I think it's. I guess I'm just wondering, what is the uptake at that office for admin? How many do they get? A lot of people, because you don't have to go down to the police station. You can just go there and report. So, do you have any stats on the uptake on that?
There we go. It's certainly not significant. We haven't even gathered statistics on it. It's probably more of a convenience thing for people that maybe are not as mobile or don't have access to transportation, those kinds of things. So it's certainly not a significant intake like when we used to have the service centers there and we had an intake counter and that. But it's more of an informal, if somebody has an issue that they need to report, they can go in and have a conversation, and we'll take the report there rather than just referring them for an extra effort down to the police station. It's kind of like a first contact kind of a thing.
So then would that mean that a police officer then has to remain all day or
No.
at that station?
No, we don't staff it. So it'd be more of those informal, somebody's talking to an officer and they have a
Okay.
report, or somebody outside of the police agency is talking to someone at the Mama-Wheaton, and they can come in and have a conversation.
Okay.
I think if I can just add to that, what Inspector Walter's saying, a lot of what we get in the conversations that happen with our officers there are more community problems. So it's not reporting a break and enter to my house, but it's talking about, garbage in the alleys, graffiti on buildings. Like, it's not necessarily reporting an incident, but talking about trends that are happening in the community. A lot of people, especially with the access to Mama-Wheaton, they may not, citizens that are there may not be there specifically to talk to police, but by virtue of the fact that there's police officers in that facility every day, those interactions happen a lot. And so we get a lot of feedback that way from people as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And does that feedback then come back to city staff?
Yes.
Okay. That's great, thank you. Just in regards to, last question, I guess, just in regards to walking the beat, do you walk it in North Central? Because I saw it as well. How do you determine, because downtown as well, is there certain staff just to North Central? Or is it depending, today I'm in North Central, tomorrow I'm downtown? How does it work?
Yeah, so our patrol-based beat is downtown prescribed. I mean, they'll drift a little bit in and out of there depending on what's going on. The community engagement unit, is primarily North Central, but they'll cover other areas of the city as well if there's an event or something that they can go out and engage. So there's no prescribed beat for the community engagement unit.
Okay, so there's not a prescribed beat for North Central, is there?
Correct.
Okay. And would we ever think there would be a need to be walking the beat or be available in North Central at all? Is that?
I guess it would depend on what's going on. Again, the function of the beat downtown is about getting out of the car. It's harder to get around. Right, downtown is pretty densely populated. It's hard to get around. Hard to find necessarily where you're going to park, those kinds of things. So by getting those members on foot patrol or on bikes, it makes them easier to respond to different things, easier to get in and see people. Whereas the North Central is geographically bigger, so a little bit harder to get around. So they will go out and they'll walk when it's appropriate if there's an event or things, or they'll bike just to get a little bit more interaction. But their primary focus isn't taking calls. It's more about just being visible and building relationships. So they're a little bit more strategic about when they'll walk the beat or ride the bikes.
And we've done collaborative work. So with White Pony Lodge,
Yes.
we've gone out and done specific nights where we'll go out, send officers out, walk with them. We've done beat cop nights where They've had, not just officers that are assigned to that area, but even other officers. I've been out, I think Dean's been out walking with officers in that area on specific evenings. Fifth Avenue tends to be a really important corridor. You've got Eagle Heart Center, North Central Family Center, All Nations Hope, now Circle Project at the end. So there's a lot of kind of what I would call service providers, community organizations along there. And so to Brad's point, our community engagement unit, especially in the summer when they're out on bikes, they'll target a lot of, and I say target in a positive way, stop in, have visits with the staff there, interact with clients that are visiting. They'll just really try and make their presence known in that area. But to the point that Brad was making, that downtown area is really a finite number of blocks where they walk. North Central's a pretty big area. Even if you take from Dewdney and Albert to Pasqua and First Avenue, say, that's a big area. And so putting 2 officers out to walk in that area, you know, you can't be responsive if they need you very quickly. Bikes, you can be a little more effective. So we kind of do more focused, targeted work. And so sometimes we'll walk with community groups, or if there's an event going on, sometimes they'll shut down Fifth Avenue for an event. We'll have officers out on the beach or on foot for those types of things as well.
Okay. When police focus downtown as well, council approved funding to go to both warehouse and bids for their own patrol, or more to staffing for patrol. How does that take any pressure off police, or how is that working, I guess?
Yeah, so Brad, do our beat officers go over to, you know, kind of the where, like the Sears Clearance Center? Do they do any beat work over there?
I haven't seen anything specific to that. That would be more the North District, so I don't
Okay.
think the beat would, I mean, they may drift every once in a while a little bit based on need, but I don't think it's a primary focus.
Right. And yeah, but you know, to answer your question, I don't have a data set in front of me, but I can tell you absolutely, it would reduce the number of times that police were called, because a lot of that work allows people to proactively help people to get to the service they need, get the support they need before it reaches a crisis and police are called. So the downtown group have absolutely been great for that, and I'm going to assume that this new one is going to have the same effect as well.
Okay, that's great.
Specifically, that community support team, I was just talking with Inspector Chittard, who was in this area before I was, that certainly have helped our members, because they're providing assistance to people, vulnerable people at need that maybe don't require a police response. They just need some support and getting to the right support group. So they've been a big help for us.
Okay. Copsicle, which I think was awesome this past summer, and it kind of got out into the community. It was just a different look. I would like to see that, you know, not just in inner city. I'd like to see it across our city, in and out of different areas. I think it's important for all kids, all youth. I don't know how communities, I guess, request, but I think it's something that should be kind of just, it's another awareness that was kind of fun for communities. So that can just be a takeaway, but I think, you know, it's important.
Yeah, Brad will be able to take that back to his team and talk about it. I know Dean and I stopped at one out east there last year. Firefighters were eating all the popsicles, but we did go, and I know, Laura Lee, you've got something as well.
Yeah, so last summer they put on a lot of miles pulling that cooler on their bike. They were in all 4 corners of the city. They were out in Harbor Landing. They were up in the extreme northwest. They were out east. They were in North Central. And so they really were everywhere. And like I said, pulling that cooler, I think they had to put another set of tires on it. But yeah, absolutely, that is really their focus, is to hit the entire city. And yeah, great project that some of our officers that work in that area, it was their brainchild to bring that forward.
Yeah, so good. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks very much, Councilor Brasciani. No other questions. So I got a couple. Correct me if I'm wrong, but property crime, the Central Division is 25% of this overall city's property crime and 37.8% of the city's crimes against person. Have I got that from the report correct?
Sorry, I'm just having a little trouble hearing you. 25% of the overall city crime and
For property and crimes against people was 37.8% of the,
Yes.
of the total cities, right?
Yes, it was higher for the crimes against person.
My question is, do those two stats represent the percentage of calls for service in the central district?
I don't know.
There would be a correlation to it. I don't know that we have that actual data in this report, but I think it's safe to say that we go to a higher proportionate amount of crimes against person in that central district than we do compared to the other two. And so the calls for service to that area, I would say, would be representative of that as well.
And in part because it's actually quite a small geographical area.
Right.
The volume is, according to geography,
Right.
to your, and to Deputy Chief's point about boundary issues and calls.
There's a lot of factors, as I'm sure the whole commission can appreciate, that play into that. It's got to do with socioeconomic factors. It's got to do with rental properties. There's a lot of things that play into that. And so areas that you see high property crime, usually there's reasons why the property crime is higher in a certain area than in another versus, if you looked at the amount of people that need support and assistance from all kinds of different service providers from a social standpoint, in terms of housing, addictions, mental health, and whatever, it tends to be more concentrated in the central area of our city, and sadly, victimization often will follow that trend.
Okay, thank you for that. One final question. Inspector, could you please tell me about the housing standards enforcement team?
Yeah, we have a member, I can speak in generality to that. We have a member of our CEU unit assigned to that. And obviously they've been working with bylaw. I know based on the conversations I've had with them, it's a significant challenge in the north central area with the number of houses that are boarded up, uninhabitable. It is seriously an ongoing problem that is fairly widespread.
Thanks. Do we have any stats on the housing standards enforcement team, either yourself or the city, in terms of?
I don't have them with me, but it's
Yeah.
probably something I could get. We have a member on the
Yeah.
committee, so we wouldn't obviously generate those, but I'm sure we can acquire those.
Sir, I won't ask the police service to do it. I'll ask the city
Okay.
to do it. Thank you very much. I was just intrigued that there was such a thing when we continue to have such issues. It would seem to me that would be a good news story if there was good news there. I will thank you very much for the presentation. I see no other questions from the commission on this, and thanks again very much for the work in terms of putting these reports together to all of you, please.
Thank you.
Chief, is there anything you want to add before I, okay?
No, thanks for the dialogue.
Commission, can I have a motion to receive and file the report in its compilation? Thank you, Commissioner Duncan. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Next up on the agenda is PO 22-14, the monthly crime statistics for March of 2022. Chief, could I ask that you please introduce that report?
Sure. So this is our monthly crime stat report, and I'll just hit a couple of the highlights. Crimes against property. We've seen a year-to-date increase of 8.6% over where we were at this time last year. I do note that our theft of auto rates are still lower than they have been, so we're 17.8% lower than we were at this time last year. Crimes against the person is showing a decrease. We're at 4.5% down from where we were last year. That's 28 incidents less than compared to March of 2021. And so overall, when you put the two categories together, we've got a 5.6% increase in total crime stats for the city of Regina. And at the back of our report, we've got the dashboard for drug overdoses. Our numbers, while still high, and we try not to become desensitized to the fact that each of these numbers represents a person who's in crisis and an overdose, but the numbers are showing some promise compared to some of what our numbers were last year. And then the dashboard with regard to both monthly and daily stats on things like traffic stops, domestic conflict, missing persons, suicides, and drug seizures are located at the back as well. That's all I've got on that.
Thanks very much. Any member of the commission have any questions about the crime stats for the month of March? Seeing none, I just, Chief, if I could ask you one question. Alarm calls for service, a year-to-date increase of 14.6%. These aren't false alarms? Like, is this correlated with robberies?
I know it's not your area, but.
The increase would be all calls for service, so 90-something.
Okay, so I'm asking Elizabeth Nguyen, even though it's not her area, but she still ran that area for a number of years, so has some expertise there. But yeah, it would be all calls for service, so there would be, a number of those would be false alarm calls. A great number of those would be.
Okay. Thank you very much. Commission, could I have a motion to receive and file the crime statistics report? Thank you, Commissioner. Councilor Brushy, Annie, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Seeing none? Carried. I need a resolution for private session. Can I have a motion? Thank you, Commissioner Yee. We will have a recess for 15 minutes, I know, 2 in 1 hour, while a media scrum occurs, and we'll come back for the private agenda in 15. So, Chief, let's just call it 11:20. Thanks.